This first video I'm going to do is on the practical 3 JavaScript validation question that you were required to do. I'm going to demonstrate in this video how you can go about iteratively building a solution to the question on how we can validate fields. What we want to do in this demonstration is we want to check whether the registration date comes after the date of event. If that case is satisfied, we want to alert the user with a message, highlight the fields, and ask the user to correct the entries before we insert the record into the database. The end result is going to look like this. If I put the date as 12th of September and I put the registration date as the 28th, when I click submit, a message comes up. Registration closing date is after the event date, and the boxes are highlighted notifying the user of which fields to correct. Alright, so to get started on that, we're going to go into our submit new event form, and as I said to you before in the lectures, we put all our JavaScript code in an HTML block. So I'm going to add a new HTML block. I'm going to go into source mode, and I'm ready to start typing. Now, I gave you a template that you can copy and paste into this HTML block. So on the left here, we have the template, and it's got a function definition already created for us. So now we can start adding the JavaScript into this. What I always like to do is I always like to make sure that we can actually first get into our JavaScript before I build a full-on solution. So the standard approach I'm going to take is make an alert. I'm just going to show the number 1. Outside of the function, what I want to do is whenever the onSubmit button is clicked, I want to call my function check validation. And we've done this many times. This is going to be a standard way to start your validation. You always want to call the function on the submit button method. So we have to first get the element that we want to be working with. And as you've seen before, we're getting the element from the Caspio form. What do we want to do? We want to assign onSubmit call the check validation function. And you'll remember I told you specifically for Caspio, if you're calling functions from the onSubmit button, do not add brackets after the function call. So we'll just end it off like that. We copy and paste this across into our form. If we preview it, we click submit, we've got our alert equals 1, alert 1. Now we can go and we can actually do some logic to check the fields. So I've showed you before how to use the console. We can open the console, the developer's console, by pressing F12 on the keyboard. When we press F12, on the left here we've got this item to inspect an element. The first element we want to get is the date of event. Now if you don't know what the date of event ID is, you can hover over it. You can see it says insert record date of event. So we will get that, and we will assign the value from that to some variable. So let's call that variable date. Again, we want to get the element by ID. It's called insert record date of event. And just be aware that Caspio is JavaScript is very case sensitive. So the difference between an uppercase F and a lowercase f in this variable will be the difference between your code running and your code not running. So take note of your capitalization when you're working with IDs. So we've got the element. What do we want to do? We want to get the value from that element. Alright. Again, let's show us an alert to make sure that we are actually getting a value from the date field. We add a date, 13th, we submit, we've got our date there. Alright, everything's working correctly so far. I'm going to just copy this. I'm going to copy this code for the registration closing date. I'm going to give it a different name, so registration date. I'm just going to change the field, so this will be, if I check it here, it's going to be insert record registration closing date. Okay, and then again, let's check that we are actually getting the correct value. We've got the 19th. Alright, as I have explained to you in lectures, the values that come from our fields, date of event and registration date, are text values. Now we can compare text string values against each other, but the outcomes can be unexpected at times. Now when working with dates, we have a date object that we can create, and using date objects means that we can easily compare two dates against each other, let JavaScript worry about how the comparison is done, and get the true or false result that we want. Now, in order to to create a date, to turn these into date objects, we simply add them into a date object like that. We do the same for this. If we view it now, you'll notice how the alert is slightly different to before. It's added a whole bunch of extra time. It's added time zone, it's added hours, minutes, and seconds in. Invalid date. Okay, let's see why that is invalid. Okay, I was just showing the wrong variable in the alert. I've put in a date on a date of event, and you can see now that it's changed the date into to include a lot more values. That's a date object. You don't have to worry about what that is. All you got to know now is that we have two dates, the date and the registration date, which we can now compare and check. So now let's do our comparison. It's a simple if statement. You know the structure of an if statement. It has a condition. It has something that must happen. So if our date of event is before, so that would be less than registration date, we want to come into our if statement and we want to do something. So let's check that our code is working as expected. We will put in a date, so 12th of September, the 28th of September, we expect an alert 1 to be shown. So if we click submit, we've got an alert 1. Everything is working. So let's change our alert to something more informative for the user. So we can say date of Okay, we've got on our alert. The next thing we want to do is we want to change the border color of the date of event. So as we've done previously, we have to get the element by ID. We know it's called the insert record date of event. What do we want to do? We want to change the style. We want to set the border color to red. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to do the same for the registration closing date. And let's test now if that's working. We got our alert. Our colors are changed. Alright, so our validation is working. However, if you notice here, you can see that Caspio flags this. Because our event name and date of event are required, I haven't provided an event name. What Caspio is doing is it's saying it's trying to insert a record, but the required fields are not satisfied. Because we have put custom validation in and our record is failing validation, we don't want Caspio to try and insert the record. We want everything to halt. We want the user to correct the values and then be able to submit it. And to accomplish that, we simply return false if we get inside the if statement. Returning false means at this point, when the submit button is checked, are we able to continue running? And if we get into the if statement, we say no, do not continue running, return false, and do not insert the record. We put that in our code and we test it out. We expect to not get a Caspio error, but to get just our alert and the border colors to be changed. We got our alert, border colors are changed. You'll notice that Caspio is not yet flagging any problems with the required fields. So we can go and we can say, we can create a new record. We can give it some dates that will work, 19th of September and 12th of September. Everything else, no other required fields are set. We click submit. Our submission was successful. Alright, so that was the first part. That's how we can do a validation check on the date of event and the registration closing date. That is what the solution to your Prac 3 will be. I'll upload this code on the left here to Are You Connected. I'll also upload the Caspio solution for you to go and play around with. But watch the next part 2 and 3 will be on class demonstrations that we've done. Same style, I'll show you one step at a time how we can build a solution to the validation problems.